Martin. How you doing?
Hey, Jerry. It's good to talk to you. Is this a good time for you?
Yes.
Excellent. I wanted to talk to you because we met on the Ham Radio New to the Hobby Facebook group. I really like to interview you a little bit about what are basic things you see new hands might be interested in learning. And you came up with a really cool list, and I thought we'd take a moment going over them together and offer it as tips for people either becoming a ham or brand new to the field.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, I'm actually administrator, but I'm also the creator. I created that group.
Wow.
Got 13,000 members. And got another a guy's an admin. It's pretty good. Another guy's a moderator. Bert and David, they actually manage the group, but I created it. But, yeah, so... yeah.
So first of all, I just want to thank you because 13,000 members right now, that's a lot of work to do. So thanks for you and the team and all the hard work you do to keep that a quality group for new people. I love to see people going, I just got my license. You really work to make sure people are nice on it and treat each other well.
Oh, yeah. We get a few bad apples. We have to delete and block people. We don't like to do that, but sometimes you can't help it. We don't allow advertising or selling and GoFundMe pages. It's strictly ham radio new to the hobby, just like the title says. A lot of great guys in our older hams have been a ham for years and years, giving great advice. But yeah, it's a good hobby to get into.
Excellent. Well, I want to start with what's the one thing you think is most important for someone getting into the hobby or considering it, just starting out? Where would you begin?
Well, first you got to get a book and study and study and study. There's 400 questions in the book with the answers. Out of that 400 question pool, they pick 35 questions for the test. You got to get 26 right to pass, and then you got your license. It costs $15. That lasts 10 years. You get your call sign about a week later after you pass the test, and you're good to go. And all you need is a radio.
Fantastic. And what do you recommend is some starting radios? I thought we could start with that from the least expensive to just beginning level.
Well, I've got several radios, but if I knew what I know now, I wouldn't have bought all of them. All you need is a handheld and a copper J-pole outside put up. The low-end radios is called Baofeng from China, $25 a piece. A lot of people don't like them, complain about them, but I've got 3 of them. They're not a problem. Then you can spend $300 for a Yaesu radio or a Kenwood handheld. That would be a Yaesu handheld, $300. And they're top of the line, put out 5 watts, but I've got 2 Baofengs that put out 8 watts. So you can start out with a handheld to begin with to see if you like the hobby. Then if you do, you can put a big radio in your house. You can put one in your vehicle.
I think that's a great point because whatever you do, you're always going to use a handheld, a simple radio from the Baofengs to the or at least a starting Yaesu or an Icon. You'll always have a use for that. I want to say the least expensive might have a few extra steps, but it is a hobby and it's learning about it and understanding what to do. Also, I had a friend who just got one. He hasn't gotten his license yet. And one thing I thought of is he could first look for some scanner frequencies if it's not digital trunking for the emergency service. We actually just got him to cue in the weather frequency on his Baofeng, at least to hear something to get started. And then I think you had some other ideas before they even get their license.
Yes, you can join the local club in your area. I have one here I'm a member of. You can join the club. You don't have to be a ham radio operator. You can still join the club and actually take your test at the club and get your license. And that's the way you get started and talk to other fellows.
If you got any licensed ham can take your radio and help you get it started and test it out so you can at least hear it with them. And if you're standing next to them, then you could speak over it as long as they're right next to you and they have at least a technician license or above.
Yes, that's called third-party operator. If I had someone here in my house with no license, they could talk on my radio. It's called third party. I would be what's called the control operator, and they could speak without a license as a third party, again, me, the control operator.
What else do you recommend, and what do you see as beginning level challenges that you've learned about in this big group that would be worth letting people know? Things where you see people get stuck or frustrated when they start out.
I burn up 2 radios, maybe 3. And it's a T connector for an antenna. I was going to have it in my hand to show on the video. If you hook 2 radios to one antenna with the T connector on your cable, when you key one radio, RF radiation that's supposed to go up your antenna will go into the other radio and you'll burn the radio up. I burned up 3 radios before I knew that. So you cannot hook 2 radios to one antenna. They make a switch you can put on the wall to hook your cables to and flip the switch from one radio to another. So a big no-no. Don't hook 2 radios to one.
That's a great point. And then another point I think you mentioned when we were talking is make sure there is a load on that system. Have an antenna attached or something called a dummy load with the cable. Don't just cue that thing up with nothing attached.
Right. I think I've done that a time or two. Even an old CB radio. You key a radio down with no antenna hooked to it, it'll burn the finals out of the radio and ruin it. They can be fixed, but it'd probably be better off just buying a new radio. Don't key a radio down without an antenna attached to it properly.
That sounds like some great advice there, too. You also have gotten into something called DMR. Would you talk a little bit about that? Because that's another area of ham radio.
Yeah, DMR, digital mobile radio. My regular radios is simplex is one radio to another, or if I key down hit a repeater is 2 radios hooked together. One radio receives your signal, the other one sends it out to someone else's radio. That's all radios. DMR, digital mobile radio, uses the internet. My local repeater here, I take my handheld DMR, I hit that repeater, it goes to the internet around the world and goes back in on someone else's radio. It leaves you on the radio, it's heard on a radio, but it goes to the internet. I talk around the world with a handheld DMR radio. A lot of people think it's not necessary, a cell phone do the same thing, but if you like radio, then that's DMR. Uses the internet instead of repeaters and antennas.
So that gives you a way to reach even further than you could otherwise, and there are also little units they can get that will hook in through your own Wi-Fi in your home where you do a short range connection as well. I'm also playing with DStar, which is on the ICOM radios too. So digital, this idea of a hybrid between analog and digital, it's hard to cover everything. The hobby is so massive and big. And I think that's another way people can get in. And because DMR is pretty open, it's right now a number of the Chinese less expensive radios have DMR. You have to at least get up to a little bit more expensive ICOM like the ID51 to get the DStar, which I have, to get into it as well. So these are another things they can operate on. I want to talk a little bit more about just the fundamentals of this thing called a repeater and explain to new people repeaters.
A repeater is 2 radios. They're usually set up on a big mountain or hilltop, the big antenna. I've seen videos on YouTube. The repeaters has got boxes the size of filing cabinets, but it's basically one radio hooked to another. One radio receives your signal, the other one transmits it out. 145 megahertz, 146 megahertz is a minus a 0.6 offset. 147 megahertz is a positive 0.6 offset. What all that means is the radio that receives you in the repeater, you'll key down on 145.8, it'll hear you on 145.2. So when the radio hears you on 145.8, the other radio's busy on 145.2. That way it keeps going, and one radio can't hear and talk at the same time. With a repeater hooked up to 2 radios, nobody around operating them. So that's the offset of 0.6 in your settings. Might need a little more in-depth discussion on that, but repeater is one radio hooked to another, and
Talk a little bit about frequencies for beginners too.
you got to get on ARRL, American Radio Relay League, and download what's called the band plan. It shows you a graph. I got one laying in front of me now. Frequency you can talk on as a technician. If you get the next level general class, you're open to more frequencies. So you must download or get a copy of the band plan to know what frequencies to talk on so that you're not talking illegal.
Right. Very important to understand, because each level of amateur radio has its own levels of band plans. So you want to know which they are so that you don't get in trouble speaking on a plan you're not licensed to. And it's a great beginning to understand this idea of the frequencies that we have the rights to operate on as well. Talk a little bit about antennas and coax cable for the beginners.
Well, my first cable was RG8 from eBay, really thin cable. It'll work just fine, not a problem. I've got two strands of LMR 400, really, really thick stuff. I mean, it is thick wire. It's low loss cable. When your signal goes out through the coax, you'll lose so much of it, it comes back into your radio. And the low loss cable, LMR 400, it's low loss. And top of my copper J-pole, it's 40 feet up behind my house. Before you hook the coax into your antenna, you make 5 or 6 loops as big as a softball of that coax. Wrap it around and around, make 5 or 6 loops the size of a softball, tape it up, or use zip ties. That's called a balun or a choke. Then screw your coax into your antenna. It stops the RF from coming back down into your radio. So better cable is the LMR 400. Put a choke on it by twisting the coax around in loops. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah, and I really recommend that if people are going to do this, this is where you want to find the local hobby or somebody that will help you with you. Of course, you could do it through Facebook groups and YouTube, but I prefer you find someone on the radio that will help you. At least in my area, there's a lot of amateur radio people that we have a local club. You can show up, you can get something, and also sometimes people in the local club have simple J-poles. My first J-pole was using the old TV wire and making it connected up, and somebody in the club showed me how to solder it up, and they tested it for me to make sure it didn't have a lot of the energy coming back into the radio, and it was hooked up to a little handheld Kenwood that I had. Actually, my first radio was a Radio Shack radio that unfortunately had so many problems, Radio Shack refunded it, but I love that little thing. Then I got a nice little Kenwood tri-band, and I had it hooking up to a J-pole, hanging up on the wall, and somebody helped me wire it up and test it, and got a little connector, and it got me on the road going with the 2 meter and 440.
Oh, that sounds good. Everybody's got to start somewhere, as the saying goes.
Yep. So talk a little bit about the nets and meetings and stuff and that go on. And that's another thing for beginners to start listening in on before they even get going.
Well, yeah, they got repeaters everywhere. I can hit 40 or 50 repeaters from my house, but usually a lot of the repeaters, not all of them, will have what's called a net meeting every Tuesday night, every Friday night, maybe every Saturday night. Someone will be running the net, saying this is net control, taking check-ins, and they'll be sitting there with a pencil and paper. Someone else beside them on the computer, verifying your call sign through the QRZ webpage, and they'll log you down, what time, your name, your call sign, your location. You'll have like 100 to 150 check-ins each night. That is to test your radios and equipment in case of a real emergency. Have a list of who's where. And again, a chance to test your radios weekly to know they're working. You turn the repeaters on, nobody's talking. But when they have a net, 100 to 200 people can check in. So that's pretty much what that is. Local clubs, meetings all across the United States. Like here, we have a local club, Lakeway Amateur Radio Club. You can join the club, be around fellow hams. They have dinners and get-togethers and have field days, and clubs is a good thing to join.
Excellent. Also, one point I think you brought up for new people to the ham radio, even before they get their license, is finding out if there are any police, fire, or EMF that have analog frequencies going on. And would you talk a little bit about that, and then digital trunking, because that's a little more advanced, but if they've got standard analog, you can listen in on that on your radio even before you get your license.
Well, you can get on the internet and download the frequencies for the police, fire, and EMS in your area. I have a Baofeng that I use for nothing but a police scanner. For 2 meters, technician talks on 144 megahertz to 148 megahertz. Well, the police talk on like 150 megahertz and 440 megahertz. Well, the Baofeng radio will do all that. So you can put all the police and fire EMS frequencies in a Baofeng handheld, and there you've got a police scanner. And a trunking, I have no experience with.
Yeah, the trunking is that new digital system. It's sort of like the police and emergency version of DMR or DStar, and you really need something like a Bobcat scanner, or you need a more professional scanner to get into those. So you may want to find out if there's any scanner group, so you can find out what are the analog versus digital listening. I also want to mention there is a app on the phone, and it is called Scanner on iPhone and Android, where volunteers often connect up to it, so you can monitor some of the emergency service. And we were able to find an emergency service. This is one place you could at least see what's going on in your area, and then attempt to dial it into your phone as well, and dial it into your amateur radio as well.
Yeah, and I've got the app on my phone for scanner, and you do a lot of it from your phone, but people just like to have a radio in their hand.
One more question I want to ask is, what got you to get this group on Facebook going? Because I'm just so impressed. 13,000 members. I have several groups with several thousand. I guess there's one that a good friend manages with maybe 5,000 to 7,000. That's a lot of people.
I can't answer why I've done it, but I can tell you this. I got a greenhouse a few years back and started a group on Facebook called Greenhouses and Gardens. 66,000 members.
Wow. And
I don't know. I just wanted to create a Facebook group, and I did, and I was going to change the name to something like Ham Radio Today, but the other admins in the group liked the idea of it being new to the hobby and helping new hams get in, and I've kept it that way all along.
Well, I'll tell you what I like is some groups don't want you to announce when you got your license or something, and you encourage it, and I really like to see that, the encouragement and the announcements like I just passed my test or I just got my technicians, and also that you have a good system of checking. You must answer the questions before you join the group. And I think those are a few real good things. But I think it's a good name, Ham Radio / New to the Ham. I'll put the link below as well. And I really enjoy it. Any last suggestions or tips for amateur radio people considering getting into it, as well as just join the group and learn about it? I'll also put the DMR link group that you got going too.
Oh yeah, you got to be careful with lightning with your antennas. I don't want to speak on that. Don't want to cause damage to anyone. Right. But you might want to get on YouTube and watch some videos about lightning protection for your radios. That's what I recommend. Research protection for lightning on your antennas.
That's such a good, important thing, and that's where having someone local to work with or getting their even good ARL books on it and making sure you properly ground. And again, I agree, Jerry, we don't want to give professional advice on this, but you want to make sure that one, it's grounded, and two, the good old story is just disconnecting the radios physically before a real bad storm. If you've got outside antenna, is still a pretty good system, but I agree, that's something when you start putting something on your roof or outside, you want to at least learn that, but that's part of the hobby. And that makes it interesting, and there are a lot of great hams willing to answer questions as well on that topic. Great point. Well, excellent. Yes. Well, Jerry, this was fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. I'll let you have the final word, and then we'll say clear for now.
Yeah, that is KM4ZMZ to KI4CFS Martin. I'll talk to you again one day. 73s to all the new hams. 73s means have a good day.
That's right. That's great. 73. Have a great day. You too. Take care.